Hi everybody, I'm Graeme Duncan from Right to Succeed. We're an organisation focused on place-based change, working deeply in communities that have been left behind. I think it's important that I start by actually defining what we mean by community, because a lot of people might consider communities to be very different things. What we talk about is the people and organisations that live within a geographical area or serve a geographical area. And what that means is the local residents, whether they be young and old, and some of the kind of key agencies working in and around that community, whether it be the education settings, public services, community organisations, etc. And then the organisations that community invites in. Many people in this room would be a partner that one of these communities might want to invite in to help them with a specific piece of work. So a little bit about who we are. Our role as an organisation is to support communities to work collectively to get better outcomes for their children and young people. We do this as a form of place-based change, looking to generate improved outcomes for children and young people. Our role is to bring the community together, to help them to co-design a plan and deliver that plan with a vision that the community becomes a stronger community where every child succeeds. And what we do is we apply a collective impact approach. This is probably more common in North America, but is it growing more and more traction within the UK. And when we talk about things like context and devolution to a community, this is first of all about bringing that community together to understand what the shared aims are, setting the dream of what actually this community wants to become. Now, if that's about setting the dream, the next bit is about the gritty reality of actually what does success look like, what are the outcomes we are trying to generate, and how will we measure them. Very deliberately, the mutually reinforcing activities is third, which is the activities that will get that community to where it wants to go. The reason it's third is everybody is generally in a rush to move to action. And in that rush to move to action, we make a huge number of assumptions. And in those assumptions will come the future failures. This is a piece of work about actually a long-term approach within a community to transformation. The fewer assumptions, the better. After mutually reinforcing activities, what does continuous communication look like? How does everybody feel heard? And how does everybody hear what everybody else has to say? It's a constant process of kind of building trust and understanding within that community. And then finally, the backbone support. What does the governance structure look like that guides that work within that community and gives them ownership and budget and a sense of complete agency within their community? But then what does that backbone team look like? The role that our team plays within the community, helping to coordinate all this work. That kind of backbone coordination is often the differentiation between a place-based change and a lot of stuff happening in place, which is what you would typically find in most communities. Just a little on where we work. We are probably most known for our work in Blackpool, and some of you heard Sarah Smith speak earlier today, briefly. We are also working in Rochdale as well around education system transformation work, which is very, very new to us, and in the east of England with Great Yarmouth. But I'm going to focus my attention on Liverpool City region, and in particular, the North Birkenhead project within that community. So, kicked off in 2019, which was a year before we'd heard of things like COVID-19 and cost of living crises and all that's come since. The journey to change started with a vision that every child in that community thrives from cradle to career, bringing together kind of some of the key stakeholders that might make that journey possible. It started with discovery. So collective impact work starts with a discovery period, which is about working through with the community, helping them to start to build trust with you, trust with others, and an understanding of actually what the priorities are within that community. That work typically takes a year, and it's a year of deep embedded work within that community, trying to work past a place where you have to make assumptions about what that community actually needs and wants and actually start to get to the answers. As you can probably imagine, it started lots of round tables, steering group meeting in person, lots of packed community centre consultation sessions, and then lockdown hit halfway through. And it became about introducing people to the world of Zoom and Teams and all the other kind of platforms. So it was a very difficult time for that to have hit, but the community kind of came through with us on that journey. Fortunately, we got all the kind of permissions that we then needed, the delivery plan signed off by everybody, funders, commissioners, etc., funding that, and we are now in the third year of delivery. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that delivery looks like and the impact that's been achieved. But first of all, we need to say a huge thank you to the Steve Morgan Foundation, Shine, and also our friends at UBS Optimus, as well as Wirral Council, who've made this all possible. They've made it possible by saying there must be a better way. There must be a way of getting long-term sustained change in communities that we are currently putting a lot of money into. And not only that, they came and sat week after week, month after month, in meetings in that community, listening to what the community had to say about what they wanted to do and what they needed, which was truly inspiring that they made that time as well as put the capital in that was required. So at the centre of all this is a steering group in that community composed of leaders, professionals and residents from different services and parts of the community. One of the priorities is family and services. So Wirral Council, and particularly the excellent Elizabeth Hartley, one of the associate directors, very bravely decided to delegate a team to that community, 17.2 full-time equivalents based out of a community centre, bringing together social workers, family workers, early school readiness workers, etc., all in one team based locally within that community, under a working group in that community, helping to inform how that team starts to change the way it delivers service within that community. Another priority was education, which started very firmly looking at the literacy gap, the reading gap in particular, and how schools start to bridge that gap collectively, and has since led to them starting to do more and more work collectively on SEND in particular. And in the community aspect, bringing together all those incredible assets within a community to start to work with the community to understand where the gaps might be, how they might be filled, and how a coordinated youth and community offer is created in that community that everybody becomes familiar with. And then our role in this is to act as that backbone, making sure this is a coordinated project, it's got the resource it needs, the learning that is being gained at any moment is being built into the next bit of delivery, and the next bit of delivery, and the next bit of delivery, and so on. So, progress to date. So first of all, on education, when we did the baseline work within North Birkenhead, we found that for pupils year 5 to year 9, there was a 15-month reading age gap, so children 15 months behind where they needed to be on their reading age. But the schools have done an incredible job since and closed 11 months of that 15-month reading age gap. There is still a very long way to go, but that rate of progress is quite incredible. And I know Becky Francis from the EEF is in the room, so this is using NGRT, which is the measure that's used very frequently by the EEF in their literacy trials. And it's about 1,500 kids, and it's externally validated. So it's a very, very robust result, fortunately. We mentioned also the multidisciplinary team. The kind of key outcome there is they've been 80% more effective at keeping kids away from the care system compared to their Wirral peers. It's important to kind of point out that Wirral is in the 24th percentile of the indices of multiple deprivation. North Birkenhead's in the bottom 0.5%. So that team shouldn't have had a chance of getting anywhere near the Wirral-wide figures, never mind outperform them. So I think it tells you something about how far that team has moved and how quickly. And then finally, the thing that was, of course, most affected by the pandemic because of things like furlough and doors having to be closed in youth centres and all that kind of thing was the youth and community offer. But that is now starting to thrive as well, bringing together a really coordinated offer that's doing a great job of kind of targeting where those gaps were and where the most vulnerable young people were that weren't getting the provision they needed. There was something I just wanted to share from within the data. So there's a small number of the kids had 4 data points. We actually asked the schools just to measure once a year after the first year. So we had a small subset from 2 primaries going to 1 secondary that had the 4 data points. And I think in this slide is both something about the issue of disadvantage and low-income communities, but also the hope that we should have for these communities. So first of all, if you look at that fantastic gain in the first year, followed by a devastating summer learning loss of about 4 months of reading age lost over the summer holidays. But then, whilst we could focus on that, and I think that describes the challenge that is faced by anybody working in a low-income community, look at what happened next. Look at how far and how resilient those children have been to not only come back to that level very quickly, but go far beyond. The scary thing for me is at 100, they reach national average. Now, clearly, they're going to get to national average quite soon, and they're going to go a very long way beyond. But how far away from their potential are those children, and are so many children within our low-income communities right now? I think that's quite stark when we think about it, but also a source of great hope. So as Steve mentioned, we're now very excited to be looking at how other communities, so particularly the most left behind community in each of the other 5 local authorities within Liverpool City region, takes on such a community-led approach. After North Birkenhead, we've just finished discovery work with Northwood, which is where Mayor Rotherham was born. I should point out he had absolutely no role in choosing that community. So anybody that wants to look for a conflict of interest, it isn't here. And then Holton Lee as well in Holton Council. To come next are Sefton, St Helens and Liverpool. But the thing I really love about this project, and I think another really great argument for the role of devolution, is around this project is being set up a regional governance board, which, as well as keeping accountability of the whole project, is ensuring that the learning from these communities is starting to influence regional and local policy. And where would you find that anywhere else in the kind of political system? I think that's quite an amazing thing to be really focused upon. So I just want to focus very briefly on the kind of key learning that we've had as an organisation on our journey to helping people with place-based change. There is a continuum of how we support communities, from doing things to, which, you know, if you look at the current policy base, just about everything is being done to communities, all the way up to things being done by the community. What that means for decision makers is, if you are doing it to, you are doing it from a distance, you are making decisions in Westminster, in council offices, in funder offices, in charity offices, and you are making a huge number of assumptions to make those decisions, as opposed to when it's being done by a community where the understanding of that local context is great and they are making relatively few assumptions. So that drives efficiency or inefficiency depending which end of the scale you're on. And the other thing that's then hyper important is that sense of agency within a community. So when we started as a charity, we started to focus very much on education change. And a really simple story on this was we used to have quite a traditional approach. Schools would tell us what they need, we'd bring a little bit of funding, our trustees would sign it off, and there'd be a contract with terms and conditions that said, for this money, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And one of those conditions was you have to get 90% completion rates of your assessments. And it was like pulling teeth. You get schools calling you constantly, we're at 84%, can we stop? We're at 85%, can we stop? It took months. And by the time those months had gone, there was very little time to start to intervene within that school year. We changed that completely. We put the resource in the hands of the community. We raised the budgets that they needed to do the work that they defined that they wanted to do. And we asked them, what's your target? What's your target for what proportion of kids you need to do this for? And no community has ever said less than 90%. They generally say 95%, and they achieve it within weeks instead of months because it was theirs. It was their idea. They own it. They drive it. Then they do more with the data. And we have to realise that agency is such an important part of what we need to give to our communities, much to Steve's point. The urgency, we've talked about child poverty. We need to do more for our communities on this issue. It takes 9 years of place-based change when you look at the North American evidence base to generate impact on things like social mobility and poverty. Think about how many programs that started 10 years ago when the FEA did are still working in our community right now and driving towards that population change difference. It just doesn't happen. And this is data from pre-pandemic, pre-cost of living crisis, and look at what's happening to the bottom quartile of communities. It is only set to get a lot worse. But the only hope is collective working in communities, bringing these things together. And all of you here are very much part of that solution. So I invite you to think about where you are on that scale and how you could go further up that scale as an organisation and as a set of individuals. So thank you.